You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
So welcome everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It's Thursday, March 20th, 2025, 7:35 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Getting on to the end of the winter and the spring beginning, I guess, in a couple of days. And so tonight, what I thought I'd talk about is an attachment perspective, how to end perfectionism and validation-seeking behavior. And really what we're talking about here, I think, is um, fear of success is maybe the best way for me to describe that. Perfectionism is a kind of procrastination. I remember when I was in high school, I had a friend, Jeffrey, and he would say, I can't be the best, I'm not even going to try. And that was a sort of great way of bailing on pretty much everything. That sense of humiliation if you can't do it well. Uh, we might even talk about it as a kind of exploration, really. Fear of success is related to exploration. When you're an infant, of course, you don't explore much because you can't go anywhere. During the blob stage of childhood, that if somebody puts you somewhere and comes back 3 hours later, you're still going to be there because you have no way of moving. And then gradually we do a million little infant sit-ups, a million little infant push-ups, a million little leg lifts, and we get up on all four and we can crawl. And then what you'll notice is the validation that the child requires, that support and encouragement to explore, comes from that. You know, the child will crawl a little bit away from the caregiver and turn around for reassurance. And if they get it, they'll crawl to the doorway and they'll look around for reassurance. And if they get it, they'll crawl out the door, but they'll crawl right back to make sure that that support object, that caregiver, is available to them. And then they'll explore further and further away, always coming back, always touching the caregiver to make sure that they're there and available if they need it. And the more consistent that is, the more encouragement there is, the wider the range of exploration that a child will get in. If you've ever been around a toddler learning to walk, in the beginning part, of course, they don't really walk. They sort of balance, pulling themselves up on the furniture and holding the furniture as they move from place to place, and running from furniture support to another close furniture support so that they can keep their balance. Or they'll hold on to your fingers and you'll walk along with them so that you support them. Um, Eventually being able to run around on all twos and go here and there, but always wanting to know where that caregiver is, always coming back. If they run and they fall, they're looking around to the caregiver to see whether that's okay or not. If they get that reassurance and that encouragement to keep going, they develop the capacity to explore. Uh, if they find things that are meaningful and they come rushing back to the caregiver and they offer the caregiver this wonderful thing that they've discovered, then the caregiver expresses interest and delight in what they found out, talks about what it is about the thing that they've discovered, has meaning for them, and then gives it back to them and encourages them to go again and find something else. A child learns to play, to explore, to be curious about what has meaning to them, and attempt to get it. And if they don't have that, depending on the circumstances of the interference with that, they learn other things, two of them being perfectionism and validation seeking. Perfectionism is this defense against being humiliated or rejected. You have to do it perfectly. It has to be just right. It has to be controlled. It's a kind of over monitoring to ensure that you are not humiliated, to ensure that you don't have to endure the loss of the caregiver, the loss of the love object. Validation seeking can be either look at me, 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 or just the seeking of proximity. So it can take that I'm doing the best of everybody, or it can be I'm not doing very well and I need support for that. A kind of helplessness. Fear of success is an association of the withdrawal of affection if you do well. And this comes from that early crucible of the caregiver and the child learning to explore. And it's often an interference by the caregiver in the separation of the child. In order for a child to really go and explore and discover things that are meaningful to them, they have to have separation from the caregiver. So it's a kind of autonomy that they need to have. This really happens around 18 months in life. So we don't remember necessarily the experience of learning these things. We just notice the mind states that arise when we attempt to pursue the things that we need, the things that matter to us. When is your first autobiographical memory? That's the time that it begins. Usually there's a couple of them that are sort of out of sequence, and then there's more of a flow of memory that develops. But that's probably not even 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, something like that. So all of that early conditioning is unknown to us because we didn't have an autobiographical capacity for memory. It was just that procedural or rote memory. And that's actually where we remember perfectionism. We remember validation seeking. We remember a fearfulness around success and in the procedure of exploration, not in the conscious autobiographical sense of it. I think I have this distinct memory of walking down a dirt road in Woodstock, New York. My friend had opened a sort of a gift shop, and I was walking from her gift shop, which was down the side street, to the main street. And it suddenly occurred to me that actually the problem I was having was that I was afraid of success. And every time I got close to it, it would become so anxiety producing that in order to relieve the anxiety, I would intentionally fail. Now, failure, of course, does not feel so hot, but it actually can be much less intense than the abandonment terror that arises. And so I began to break that apart. I met an interesting woman in New York named Martha Friedman, who was a therapist, and she was doing a course at the new school called Overcoming the Fear of Success. It was like one of those synergistic moments in life where the exact thing that I was looking for was a continuing education course at the local college. So I went to the course, and we actually became pretty good friends for a while after that. Um, when you have to separate from your caregiver in order to explore, even in the little explorations of childhood, the caregiver has to deal with the separation from you. So often, if they have an anxiety of separation from you, they interfere with your ability to separate from them to regulate their own abandonment here. This takes the form of overprotectiveness often. They need to keep you safe, and so they interfere with the risk taking that you can engage in rather than making the risk taking safe. And that interference, when it manifests as a withdrawal of affection or a disapproval, creates this association between your attempt at autonomy, your attempt at authentic exploration, with the loss of affection or the disapproval of the caregiver that you depend on. So each time you begin to pursue the thing that you want to pursue, the association is not, I did really well and I found out something that's really interesting and I'm going to come back and be able to show my caregivers what I've discovered, is the anticipation either of rejection or abandonment or some kind of humiliation at it. You'll remember that I said the child crawls to the doorway and then crawls out and then crawls back in to make sure that the caregiver is there, which requires the caregiver to be sensitive to the child and stay there waiting for the child to come back, knowing that that's what's going to happen. But if they lose interest in that and go off and do something else, of course, when the child arrives back, there's no one there. They've been abandoned. And that inhibits their willingness to separate from the caregiver. It interferes with their willingness to be out of sight line of the caregiver, which inhibits the exploration. Or you run outside and you fall and you roll in the dirt and you get covered in mud and you rip your trousers and you come running back, and then you're chastised for getting dirty, for ripping your clothes or whatever it is that matters to the caregiver. And so you begin to inhibit your ability to take risks. Of course, when you don't take risks in childhood, you don't learn how to regulate the experience of taking a risk. If you have caregivers that are very controlling, very directive of what you are supposed to be engaged in discovering, and something that's authentically meaningful to you, that's authentically interesting to you, that you go and discover and you bring back to them, and they completely dismiss it and shut it down and redirect you into something that they think is of interest, then that's that humiliation at the authentic expression. You begin to restrict it, restrict the expression of it. You begin to hide it and be more organized in what it is that the caregivers want from you. The problem with all of this, of course, is that you begin to develop this inauthentic self-expression. You begin to be dependent on the descriptions of what's meaningful from your caregivers, and you develop this false sense of self, this inauthentic self, but you don't develop the authentic self, the authentic interests, the authentic pursuits, which exacerbates this later in life because you're good at pursuing the things that don't really matter to you, but you're not good at pursuing the things that really are. And the depth of your perception of what's really meaningful to you is also not very well developed. And so that authentic experience of self is this underdeveloped, underrealized, klutzy sort of experience that if you begin to bring it out in your adult life, opens you easily to the experience of rejection or humiliation because it's so underdeveloped. So then how do you begin that process of tolerating that so that you can begin to do something new? As Suzuki Roshi wrote, The Beginner Mind, right? How can you stay in the beginner mind? Or maybe even transport some of the skill development in your inauthentic self and adapt it to the pursuit of things that actually have meaning. Um, so if you can't be perfect, you can't do it at all. is that place to get into. I can't risk the humiliation. I can't do it very well. So it's better that I don't do it, which then deprives you of meaning. It's always this place I'm talking about is um, to avoid humiliation, to avoid rejection, to avoid being abandoned. You don't engage in the exploration, but then you don't find enough meaning. And so the creeping despair of not having a life that has enough meaning gnaws at your ankles. So it's a rock and a hard place, really. You don't have much choice about it. You can endure the despair, hunker down, and wait for it all to be over, which sadly is a position that many, many people take. I wish I had a new show I could watch when I got home. Mudit?
So, are you saying if that is the case, you hunker down and pursue the exploration, even though it feels that you will not reach, even though it will not be perfect, and even though you will feel the loss and
Oh,
the accumulation?
I think that people who are unwilling to bear that, whose perfectionism interferes with their exploration, or whose validation interferes with their exploration, uh, particularly as life unfolds and they get older, uh, abandon really trying to overcome that. And they just hunker down, waiting for life to be over without pursuing so much meaning. And they use mainly distraction as a way of coping with the, the creeping despair of not having a realized life. Viktor Frankl said, those who don't pursue meaning pursue pleasure. And so that's what they tend to do. But the pleasures that we have available to seek are mainly in the distraction category. Uh, I
So,
think at least.
so are you saying to still go for the exploration, even though you personally will feel the humiliation, you will feel the despair?
Well, part of it is to recognize that if you don't know how to do something, you're not going to be good at it the first time. And to enjoy that, uh, it's not it's not inherently humiliating not to be able to do something well. There can be a lightness and an enjoyment to learning how to do something. I remember I learned to play the tuba when I was a kid, and at the beginning of learning to play the tuba, it seemed to go really fast. The freshman burst, right? And then the sophomore slump. Remember the sophomore slump? You're not learning as fast enough, and you actually have to develop some skill in order to do it. So it feels like you're not learning at the same pace, and it's not going as well as it was going before it. We have to be able to endure that, and we have to be able to express that to people. One of the things that makes exploration different than auto-regulating is that there's an exchange of discovery, right? You go out and you find something that really matters to you, and you come back and you express that to somebody who you're intimate with, and they go out and explore something and discover something and come back and express to you what they've discovered. And in that exchange of information, you actually develop the capacity to explore at a much faster rate than you would if you didn't have that exchange, because you don't have to do all the exploration. You get the exploration experience of other people that then can help you with your own exploration. But when we don't risk the exchange with other people, we don't get that bonus of their exploration, but it also tends to become more of an auto-regulating strategy. It's an attempt to occupy and consume the time that we have with enough interest and concentration that it goes by. It's another way of just hunkering down and getting it over with. Autoregulars tend to be also more isolated than people who require regulation from other people. And I do want to emphasize that the conditioning that sets all of this up happens before you have autobiographical memory. So you don't remember the setup of it. If you could remember the setup of it, it would probably be easier to dismantle. The fact that you crawled to the doorway, crawled out, and when you crawled back, your caregiver was gone, is not a good reason not to do something. Although in adulthood, it can create a panicky situation and that fearfulness can actually prevent you from doing it.
So despite everything, despite the feeling of all the negative emotions, you still pursue the activity, the meaning making.
Right. Well, I think what's just popped into my mind was learning to ride a two-wheeler. Do you remember when did you learn to ride a two-wheeler? And do you remember how it happened? I had training wheels on, and I was quite content to ride around the neighborhood with training wheels. But one day my dad came home and said, "You're too old for training wheels. It's humiliating that my child is essentially incapable of learning how to ride." And with all things like my dad, he just took them off as if that would somehow magically teach me how to ride. And so he insisted that I ride. So I would ride and fall down and ride and fall down, ride and fall down. And he insisted, and I'd ride, fall down and ride and fall down. And then all of a sudden, as these things kind of go, I figured it out and I rode off. But I didn't know how to stop. Uh, and I didn't know how to turn. So by the time I reached the second block of riding off, I got a little frightened. So I just fell over to stop. And then I turned the bike around and I got on it and I rode back. And when I got back to my house, of course, my dad had lost interest in me riding and had left. And so I had that visceral experience of, you know, riding into Paris, having just won the Tour de France and no audience being there. So I just parked the bike, and I don't remember ever riding it again because of that. Which is, you know, how children react to these kinds of things. But um, how do you overcome that kind of conditioning? Because of course it creates a map, it creates an expectation of what will happen. When you have a lot of control from the caregivers, then they really are organizing you in what you're supposed to be doing, then a lot of your attention and exploration gets tied up in what will receive validation from someone else, right? So you do the things that matter to someone else rather than the things that matter to you in order for them to get the attention that you need, or you feign a kind of helplessness and seek attention in being helpless. That's more on the preoccupied side. The dismissing side is that wild perfectionism, and the preoccupied side is the validation seeking. What is it that really matters to you? What is it that really you find meaningful? And can you begin to organize your primary exploration around what's meaningful to you? It does, of course, bring in the cultural aspect of it. That perfectionism and validation seeking on the dismissing side can also mean uh, degrees and awards and the things that you can then hold up that demonstrate the value of your social position. It can mean uh, teleological stuff, cars, houses, that sort of thing. All of that is a kind of uh, a need for to be seen and valued in a particular way. And if that aligns with what's actually meaningful to you, then it's fine. But if it doesn't align to what actually means something to you, then even if you get those rewards, it doesn't prevent the creeping despair from gnawing at your heels and calling you out at the emptiness of things. Would it?
So I'm realizing that there is no actual solution to this problem. You just have to push against the creeping despair and still pursue the meaning-making activity, hoping that it will produce meaning.
Well, you push your exploration in the direction of things that are actually meaningful to you, regardless of what their value is in our culture, regardless of what the value is in the society of your uh, friends and coworkers and your family system. And that will set the creeping despair back because you'll have found that meaning. How do you organize a life so that primary exploration is this at the center and secondary exploration, the gathering of time, energy, and resources to support the primary exploration are in balance, is the question. And not so much at the end of the week or at the end of the month or the year, but every day that the best part of the day is actually spent on the primary exploration, and the secondary exploration occupies uh, the lesser part of your beingness would be ideal.
Although the creeping despair would take many, many months, because you already have your mind since, I don't know, so many years, all your life. And you can't just start exploring and suddenly the creeping despair goes in the back. It will take months, years before it happens.
I don't know that that's necessarily true. It's each moment that we're concerned with, really. Do you have a sense of that contentment of life being in balance? Do you know what I mean? Um, there's a kind of ease and a kind of peace that comes with that life being in balance. And so you're at the kitchen sink and you're filling the pitcher with water, and there's a sense of satisfaction in that because it's in balance. Uh, you make a cup of tea, you feel a sense of contentment and meaning. How many hours a day, I'd like to say, can you go full speed ahead on something that is satisfying in the primary meaning sense of things? 2 or 3, maybe? 2 or 3 hours a day that you can do it, where everything is drawn together and you can. And then what do you do with the rest of the day? You have to sleep some of the day, right? Some of the day you have to eat, but that still leaves, 8 hours, 10 hours of the day that you can't be engaged in the primary exploration because you don't have the physical energy resources to do it. So then you can engage in the secondary exploration if you need to. Not everybody needs to support themselves through their financial contribution, but a lot of us do. I mean, there's never been a part of my life where I wasn't the one who had to do that, really, after leaving home. Um, But it really is the balance and not saving it for the end of the day when all of the resources are zapped and you can't do it anyway, but really fitting it into a place where you can manage to have that, because then it's that feeling spills out on the rest of the day, and there's a sense of completeness.
And that could also include like meditations in the morning alone, even though it's a solo.
Yeah, it's not most primary exploration is solo, and meditation certainly is a valid primary exploration. The and very fruitful. I mean, if you really begin to understand the nature of the human condition, you can alleviate a lot of suffering simply by sidestepping it. So imagine Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill and just having insight into the nature of the human conditioning and just stepping aside and letting the rock roll down the hill and continue on the path over the hill. Kind of how I see that. But really, it is the thing that's essentially meaningful to you. Now, of course, each of us, uh, our conditioning is unique. And so the thing that's meaningful to us is also unique. One of the things about that's, if you have, what you'll notice about people that explore well, and that spend time pursuing what's primarily meaningful to them, is that they exchange that with other people that also do it well and also have primary meaning, and that synergy lifts everything up. And there's no sense of the need for the appearance of perfection. There's no sense really of the need for validation, but certainly would be available from the people that support you in your exploration, because the process of discovery is the thing that's so interesting and also so helpful to other people. If you describe the process of your discovery to someone else, they have an idea of what a process of discovery in that area might be, rather than having to simply flail around trying to make progress. It really is useful in a way. Um, I'm trying to describe that feeling. It's a peace, but the peace of liveliness, I guess, is the way to describe it. It's lively, it's curious, it's fun, it's enjoyable.
That's related with dopamine by any chance.
It might be. I hadn't equated it to drugs.
The drugs.
Dopamine. Well, you're if you're dopaminergic, all the uppers are dopaminergic, and all the opiates are endorphins, right? The translation into the body of what you get blasted with. But yeah, the confidence that you can discover the things that you need to find meaning, the energy and curiosity to be able to pursue it, the resilience so that you don't get hung up on either the perfectionist side or the validation seeking side. Resilience really is this idea that most things don't pan out. They just don't. And so but who can be bothered with the things that don't pan out? You're going for the things that do. And so you just on you go, disregarding it. Oh, next. So I like to say my mantra for that is sad next. Sad next.
You mean the things that you try?
Yeah. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, let's try this. Um, I bought these containers to plant for some to have some fruit trees on my terrace. So last year I got a fig tree, and we had about, I would say, 24 figs last summer. They were lovely. And so um, I bought these 2 containers, and I had in my mind uh, this idea of where the container would go. And so I put it there, and it didn't work at all. So I had this other idea where I'd put it. I put it there, it didn't work at all. And then I put it over here where it currently is, and it's sort of okay. And I was talking to my Tyson, who I spend most days with working in. I said, cherries, pomelos, or cava oranges for the tree. And he said, well, obviously cherries. But the thing about cherries is that they don't ripen after you pick them. So you have to leave them on the trees until they're ripe. And we have a lot of squirrels. And so we concluded at the end of the day that we would have a lovely cherry tree, but we would have no cherries. Pomelos have that really thick skin. So maybe we'll go with pomelos. But then who knows how big a pomelo tree has to be before it makes pomelos. And so it's off to the nursery to poke around and see. But that's that kind of process, right? Try this, try that, see what works. And then celebrate the things that work, and who cares about the things that don't really. Would it?
I love that attitude. I wish I could have a little bit of that. But I realize for some people, the attachment system needs to be off, and
It does, yeah.
and I can't ask anybody to start exploring right away.
Well, if you notice that, so on the dismissing side, the attachment system is always off. And so you do want to free it up so that it can attach, so that you can invest in people that will help support you. You can't invest in people that will support your exploration, and you can't create a secure base, then you will begin to limit your risk taking so that you don't end up in dysregulated states that you can't recover from through auto-regulating strategies. So you get the gnawing, creeping despair still gets you if you don't. With preoccupation, of course, the attachment system is on and the exploration system is off. And so you have to come into it and begin to settle the attachment system so that the exploration system can turn on. If the exploration system is on, all of these difficulties that arise are solvable, one after another, just choice after choice. Make a choice, see what happens, gather the data, decide what to do. That's making the intention, take an action, gather the data, make an intention, take an action, gather what happens. That flow with the exploration system on just is seamless. And as soon as the emotional distress happens, it ratchets up to the point that it activates the attachment system, all of that flow and decision making and being able to solve the things that come up in the exploration goes offline. You can't do it anymore. And then if you have that secure base that you can come rushing back to a half hour later, the attachment system is off and the exploration system is back on, and off you go. And if you can't, or you don't have people who will help you regulate it, and you have to do it on your own, then the auto-regulating process will take it over, but it's slow and energy intensive. And how long? It won't take that half hour. It takes half a day or a couple of days. And so then the exploration becomes disjointed. Right?
And is addiction part of auto-regulation? I know.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, auto-regulating.
Yeah.
Process addictions, tend to be more stable over time than substance addictions, because of the tolerance factor. As you develop a tolerance, you have to increase the dose. As the dose gets higher, it interferes with your ability to function. At a certain point, you function so poorly, the outside world attempts to intervene on you. You can't reduce the dose because if you do, you're dysregulated. So
That's right.
it's the dilemma.
That's right. And then stopping is like a huge period of dysregulation that you have to get through.
Right.
And
Yeah, the stopping doesn't really work. Stopping and replacing works.
that's what I'm working on, is replacing, but not replacing. My problem now is I think I replaced a lot of with sugar, and now well, I mean, for the last 15 years, I've been borderline diabetic, but now I'm in my 60s, and it's
Oh,
I really got, this Haagen-Dazs addiction though. I've been doing really good the last week or so, but I can't regulate myself like that.
my first sponsor, I was so skinny when I came into the rooms in 78. And my sponsor said, every night you're going to go home. And on the way home, you're going to stop at the deli and buy a pint of Haagen-Dazs, and you're going to eat the whole thing. Still mad at him for doing that to me.
Oh, coffee Haagen-Dazs, it's the best thing.
And in those days, it was honey, vanilla, and carob. So we were being health conscious. Hilarious.
Yeah, that's right. No. So I've been doing good with that. But anyways,
Good.
yes, it's the creating the new things, right? It's not, the new thing can't be eating disorder, right? That's
No.
the other way I go, is like, I'll just control everything and I won't eat and I'll mark
Right.
things down, right? It's like,
No.
that's not good. But it's this exploration I got to get to.
Yeah. What is it that's going to be? The thing at the beginning, if you don't really know what's meaningful to you, you can try anything.
Yeah.
And you're always doing it. And one of the examinations of it is, do I find this meaningful? And if you don't, but there's any piece of it that's meaningful, you can narrow the focus and move to the next thing in pursuit.
Yeah. It's easy to get bogged down in validation for things and then think that's the meaning, like for me, as an artist, it's so easy to get caught up in validation, because that's the name of the game if you're going to make,
well, on the branded side of things.
Yeah, I had to, well, I mean, it wasn't hard. It's hardly people were demanding my work, but I did stop showing at galleries and stuff because I couldn't handle it anymore, because I was only making what they wanted to see and not what was meaningful to me.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the dilemma. And then what do you do is, if the meaningful stuff isn't what they want?
Then I just give up trying to ever make money.
Yeah.
And then try to make peace with the fact that I'm an artist and I don't make any money. And so what is my meaning on the planet, right? Because
then it's the balance between the secondary exploration, the gathering of resources, and making the work that's meaningful.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
So why don't we do a little meditation? What would you like to do?
I'll always go for metta.
Okay, let's do that. So go ahead and take your meditation posture. Okay, let go of the meditation. So we have a level 2 meditation and addiction going on. If you're interested in that, we have a level 1, which is, I think, halfway through on Saturdays, for the next couple of Saturdays. And then in April, we're having a level 2 meditation and attachment starting. Those are the courses that we have coming up. And if that's interesting, you take a look. I offer the teaching freely, but I do hope if you're resourced and you can make a donation, you will. It helps support me and also the work Mettagroup is doing. There's a donation link on our website. Thank you for your practice. Good to see you. I will see you soon. Bye.